So namaste.
Namaste.
And good morning to you. Thank you for being here today. So as I mentioned earlier, we're continuing with this month's theme of divine doubt. And this week, as announced earlier, we're talking about the collective inner experience. And that brings us to our topic, which is called carrying our doubt together. In the first Sunday lesson of this month, I shared the definition of doubt with you. And going back to my notes for that Sunday, I define doubt as feeling of uncertainty or lack of conviction, to feel uncertain about or to fear. Since that first Sunday 2 weeks ago, when I was sizing up the topic and wondering where in the world it was going to go, I've begun to grasp more of the purpose and the intention for this month's theme. I have to be honest with you, right?
Yeah.
and then I also now see how it pertains to us as spiritually aware individuals in the world, because we are. Okay. Doubts are those disquieting feelings we have when we listen to a news broadcast about something happening in our country or in the world, some occurrence or conflict or intention-setting summit or meeting of powerful people in the world. The wondering, the kind of pondering, maybe even a little fear about how this all came about. What was behind it? What does it mean for all the parties involved? How will this unfold, and for how long? And how will it ultimately affect life in the here and now? For me, and for all the billions of other people on this planet. So 2 weeks ago, we started our discussion of divine doubt, looking at self-doubt, the thoughts we have about ourselves. We talked about how completely human it is for us to have self-doubt, and how acknowledging our doubts and even voicing them out loud takes power away from them. That when we allow ourselves to be vulnerable and to address those doubts out loud, we open the door to self-discovery and a connection with the others in our world. Last week, Debbie talked about debuting the doubting self, letting ourselves honestly express our feelings, our concerns. It was about being real and showing up authentically in the world. And so today's topic, carrying our doubt together, is about first our humanity, our shared humanity, our collective doubts, our uncertainties and our fears. And then it's about sharing our collective doubts, bringing them, exploring them, and opening ourselves collectively to spiritual development for our collective growth and ongoing health. And then last, we're going to talk a little bit about tapping into the collective subconscious, collective suggestion, acknowledging our doubts and moving through them to explore possibilities and outcomes. A kind of collective curiosity leading to creative possibilities and healthier outcomes. So to lay the groundwork for today's lesson, I want to share from the notes from CSL. The marketing teaser, we all have to go to the marketing teaser, from CSL reads this: we continue to explore divine doubt this month by turning to the collective inner experience, the doubts which we share amongst one another as part of our shared unconscious. What power and possibility lie in our collective doubts? If we revisit doubt as an avenue to faith and curiosity, what transformations can sharing and exploring doubt bring? Okay. That's the posit, that's the question. If we share this stuff, Okay? We carry unsettling thoughts and feelings or doubts within ourselves. And of course, they're all recorded in the subjective. Every student of science of mind knows what the subjective mind is, right? Or subconscious aspects of our being. The subjective consciousness of each of us is tied to the collective subconscious mind of the universe, the big mind, the creative mind, okay? For better or worse, that subconscious or subjective tendency creates our life experience. It creates the flavor of the world that we live in. Dr. Holmes and those of us who studied many, many years ago recognized that as what we call race consciousness. Okay? Everybody know what race consciousness is? Yeah. Okay. Well, we don't call it that anymore. I'm sorry. Because the term race means something different in today's world, CSL has moved to the term collective suggestion or collective subconscious. Does that make that move, right? So the notes for today's lesson cite a reading from Howard Thurman's book, Disciplines of the Spirit. Howard Thurman was a Black minister who created his own New Thought ministry in San Francisco many, many years ago. He was a prolific writer and very insightful in matters of spirituality. So he wrote, "There is a fellowship of suffering as well as a community of sufferers. It is true that suffering tends to isolate the individual, to create a call even within the privacy that imprisons them, to overwhelm them with self-preoccupation. It makes their spirit miserable in the literal sense of that word. Initially, it stops all outward flow of life and makes a virtue of the necessity for turning inward. Indeed, one of the ground rules of humanity's struggle with pain is the focusing of the energies of life at that single point. All of them that can be summoned is marshaled. This is true whether they are dealing with a sheer physical pain or the more complex aspect of other dimensions of suffering. The pain gives their mind something else to think about and requires what approximates total attention. The energy of life becomes available when the conditions of single-mindedness are met." Okay. So, when we are experiencing doubt, fear, pain, concern at a very deep level, our conscious awareness is focused entirely on that pain or issue and how to resolve it or overcome it. Imagine you have a toothache. You want to get rid of that toothache. Single-pointed attention to taking care of that pain. That's what we're talking about, that level of focus, okay? Self-directed focus. So, what science of mind suggests is that we take that feeling, that fear, that doubt, into the silence within us, and that we lay it down. We hand it over to Spirit, to the presence, for insight, for guidance, and for resolution. Okay? That's what science of mind teaches. Dr. Holmes wrote this in the Science of Mind. He said, "Spiritual experience is deep, calm, and self-assertive. It is the result of actually realizing that presence which binds all together in one complete whole. This experience comes in the stillness of the soul, when the outer voice is quiet, when the tempest of human strife is abated. It is the quickening of the inner person to eternal reality." And I would interject, when we're in pain and we take it into prayer, that's when we have that experience. Hopefully. As a note for today's site, we distill from this that spiritual experience often comes when the conditions of single-mindedness are met. focused on a pain, focus on a condition, focus on an experience. When you're absolutely focused on it, and you take it into that experience of the presence or spirit, that's when you get that flow, okay? That spiritual experience, sometimes that insight. Meaning that when something has happened which allows us to focus on one thing, and one thing only, we often then get the spiritual answers or experiences that we are looking for. In the context of divine doubt, fully exploring and leaning into our doubt can be the catalyst for a deeper and a richer faith. The spiritual experience that we are looking for is often possible because of the concentrated effort required by doubt. I would add by fear and by pain, okay? Is this resonating? Are you identifying with what I'm talking about when you have something that's so painful, so hurtful, so disturbing that you're completely focused on it? And then when you finally get tired of turning the Rubik's Cube of that huge issue around, you finally surrender because you're a religious scientist into prayer, and you say, I can't do this, God. I need to turn it over, okay? When we surrender it, that's when we get that spiritual insight. That's when the opportunity for that spiritual experience comes to us. Am I the only one? Okay. So, but it's a very interesting point. Consider it if you haven't, or think back in your own life. When you've taken that kind of painful doubt or experience into prayer and just surrendered it, and then something comes. Okay. The doubts that come up for us individually and collectively are actually like doorways or opportunities to understanding, to our personal deepening awareness, our focused attention, and call us into connection with God's insight, with God's wisdom, resolution, reconciliation. It may not change the situation, but it may change us so that we can see it in a different way, so that we can surrender whatever is blocking us. Doubts, fears, and unsettled feelings about what's happening in the world are a common thread in our human experience. When there are tensions in the world, wars, summits, nations taking control of other nations, people being displaced, or the subject of genocide, individually we may each be feeling unsettled in a doubting space. In all honesty, individual doubting becomes collective and communal doubting at the subjective or subconscious level. Remember, we're talking about that old race consciousness, the prevailing idea, the prevailing feeling. We may not talk about it individually, but we might also individually be praying for resolutions, for better outcomes, the end of conflicts. Maybe unspoken, but still there is the question, does it really have to be this way? Is there not a way that we could possibly reconcile these issues without destroying and killing? Is this all inevitable, or is transformation of this experience possible? And the bottom line, what can I do? What is mine to do? Big questions for us. That's when this divine doubt, the single-mindedness of the collective consciousness, opens the door to deep discussion, to possibility, to reconciliation, to resolution. In short, divine intervention and guidance. And I do believe in that. I hope you do too. In today's world, each morning we hear or read about some type of conflict or a disturbance somewhere in the world. If you do Apple News, oh my God, it's like, okay. If you do BuzzFeed, okay. If you do whatever's on the TV, there's always something there to grab your attention. Day after day, we are literally bombarded with information, with stories, with tales of things that go on the other side of the world that, taken by themselves, can overwhelm us in their immensity, and taken together, they can be absolutely terrifying if you allow yourself to go there. But most people don't do that. They take the news in stride and just go off to work or do what they're going to do. And there's no wailing, no beating of chests, no, just usually silence. Maybe a nod to something that's going on. And the truth is, I don't think any of us want to be called a henny penny. Does anybody remember what henny penny is? The sky is falling. The story about the hen who gets hit by something and she says the sky is falling and she runs around saying that. Well, none of us want to really have that level of anxiety. But at the same time, we internalize a lot of the data and the news, and we still remain relatively calm on the outside. Internally, though, we're living as part of a community of sufferers. That's how Thurman put it. A community of sufferers, people that stuff their feelings, that stuff their doubts, their concerns, their fears. Taking the time to bring our doubts, our fears, our concerns, our internal conflicts to the collective awareness of those around us acknowledges those feelings. It really isn't about blame, which honestly doesn't resolve anything. It is about acknowledging the feelings and the concerns we have in a conscious way. When we create the space and allow ourselves and others to speak to those internal issues, we open the door to collective discussion, to recognition that we are not the only ones that feel this way, and to the possibility of at least understanding, perhaps even growing, or even coming to a resolution. As students of the science of mind, we know the subjective or subconscious thoughts, feelings, and emotions that we each carry influence how our lives unfold. What we attract, what we repel, how we're treated, how we see ourselves. We create a subjective experience, and we do that collectively in a subjective consciousness. It's equally powerful and creating the collective subconscious, the collective subjective is powerful in creating the bigger world we live in. Taking the time to acknowledge our individual doubts and share them with the collective brings them into the open and allows the others in our communities to also bring their doubts to the table. When subjective fears or doubts are brought to the light of day, the light of discussion, the light of eternal wisdom of the presence, there is, I believe, a kind of reckoning, bringing the boogeyman out of the closet. I'm sorry, I don't know where that came from, but that's what it is. You know, it's under the bed. No, it isn't. There it is. You know, we look it straight in the face. We acknowledge it. There it is. Okay, with all of its spikes and whatever. So, voicing our doubts takes the power away from them. Does that make sense? Okay, when you stuff them, you compress them and they get all that energy in them. But when you let them out and you discuss them and you come to some kind of collective understanding about them, then you begin to, they become malleable. You see the light of them. They begin to diminish in size, and then all the creative power that we have begins to look at all the different angles, right? Okay. Acknowledging them gives us the authority to start minimizing them. Okay? You can't do anything about something you don't acknowledge. You don't have any power. It's when you acknowledge it and you take possession of it. That's when you can begin to do something about it. Sharing our fears, our doubts, draws us into a community. And coming together in community amplifies the power. Amplifies the power. There's a famous reading, I don't know if it's the Desiderata or something Marianne Williams wrote, but she said, we are not powerless. We are powerful beyond measure. We are powerful beyond measure. We need to remember that and just move in that direction. So as we come to the end of our lesson today, the challenge then is for each of us to give thought, attention, and prayer to the doubts that we hold. Now that can be a scary process. When you are disturbed by something in the news, what about it disturbs you? Is it a threat to your values? Is it a threat to your life or the lives of someone you know? Maybe you have family living in Iran. Does it go against your personal values? And what doubts do you know about or sense arising from others in your community? What fears are there? What's unspoken? What concerns? Can you relate to what they're saying? Can you understand where they're coming from? Can you engage in a conversation to maybe even explore those feelings with the intention of growing and understanding of the others around you and their perspective? Taking the time, taking the courage to engage in those conversations sharpens our understanding of our collective feelings. The more we understand and acknowledge the feelings, the doubts, fears of others in our community, the better our communication and the closer we get to one-pointed awareness, where Spirit can reveal through us what we can do. One-pointed awareness, focused on the pain, coming together collectively. Spiritual community can do that. And then we can take it into prayer and know that the response is there. So I'm going to do a prayer for us this morning about this. So each of us can take that idea, those seeds of understanding with us as we leave here today and ponder them, maybe even act on them. Maybe come together in discussion after service. That would be awesome. So let's take that into prayer. Beloved Spirit, that which is all, we align with infinite intelligence, creativity, and we remember that we are one with all life, all being, that every single person on this planet is an expression of your life as we are. We lower the boundaries. We allow ourselves to bring our collective doubts, fears, concerns into the light of day. But then understanding that as we do so, we open a door for possibility, for opportunity, for resolution. And when we ask for it, divine inspiration. Gratitude for this lesson, then we say thank you. Thank you for this time. Thank you for this thought process. Thank you for this opportunity. We accept this unfolding in each of our lives in absolute perfection. And now release this word to law of mind, knowing it is perfectly done for each. And together we say, and so it is.